Satanism and the History of Wicca Part 3, Back to Wicca's History. Besides Murray, Leland, and other writers on witchcraft, another of Wicca's main sources is Aleister Crowley. Many knowledgeable Wiccans, for example the Ferrers and Doreen Valiente, do realize that Gardner's rituals were heavily based on Crowley's rituals, though they tend to overstate that Crowley was not a Satanist. Disclaimer: Crowley was not a Satanist per se, but he definitely was into satanic symbolism, in addition to the zillion other things he was into. In some defensive neo-pagan writings, for example the Church of All Worlds booklet Witchcraft, Satanism, and Occult Crime, Who's Who and What's What, it is claimed that Crowley was neither a Satanist nor a pagan, but was just into Judeo-Christian ceremonial magic. In fact, Crowley was very eclectic. Even Golden Dawn ceremonial magic included not only Kabbalah and the medieval Christian grimoires, but also Egyptian deities, Greek deities, and yoga. Crowley emphasized the Egyptian elements, downplayed the Christian elements, and added plenty of other things to the mix, including satanic imagery galore, such as his invocation of Satan in Liber Samech, not to mention his constant references to himself as the Beast 666. Some will insist that Crowley's satanic symbolism was merely a joke, but Crowley's attitudes were well within the 19th century satanic literary tradition. In most of the more sophisticated forms of Satanism, the name Satan is understood in an ironic sense. Others will explain that most of Crowley's satanic symbolism can be reinterpreted in pagan terms, but this too is true of many forms of Satanism. There is also a possibility that Wicca borrowed ideas from writings about actual Satanists living in the late 19th or early 20th century. In Crafting the Art of Magic, Aidan Kelly says Gerald Gardner drew key concepts from the description of Ozark folk witchcraft, including folk Satanism, in the 1947 book Ozark Superstition by Vance Randolph. I'll admit that Kelly's conclusions have been challenged by other historically knowledgeable Wiccans. Of course, if Gardner was influenced by Randolph's account, Gardner would probably have assumed that the satanic folk witches were really pagans whom Randolph misrepresented as Satanists. But Gardner's assumption wouldn't necessarily have been correct. An unlettered folk witch would be far more likely to be either 1. a Satanist, or 2. a devout though unorthodox Christian than to have preserved an ancient pagan religion intact. Various pagan customs have certainly survived, but this is very different from the intact survival of a pagan religion, for which there is very little evidence. For a critique of alleged evidence for pagan survival, see A Razor for a Goat by Elliot Rose. Regarding a possible medieval witch cult very different from what Murray hypothesized, see The Night Battles by Carlo Ginsberg. Regarding contemporary hereditary witches, many of whom are Christian, see Blue Nose Magic by Helen Creighton. For an example of a decidedly non-pagan grimoire that is very popular among European folk witches today, see the 6th and 7th books of Moses, available in some Botanicus. Some forms of Wicca may have been influenced by Satanists more directly than via Murray, Leland, Crowley, Aaron Reach/English, and possibly Randolph. Two possible examples: historically knowledgeable Wiccans have debated what role, if any, was played in the development of modern Wiccan by a 19th-century English farm laborer named George Pickingill, who was reputed to be a witch. Aidan Kelly, who does not believe Pickingill contributed anything to Wicca, describes Pickingill as a garden-variety folk magic witch and a homegrown Satanist. The assertion that Pickingill did play a major role was originally made by Lew in a newsletter called The Wiccan in 1974. Lew, who claimed to be a hereditary witch, described Pickingill as the world's greatest living authority on witchcraft, Satanism, and black magic, quoted by Doreen Valiente in Rebirth of Witchcraft,